So in my earlier work where I wrote Faith in the Halls of Power, I was really looking at the role of faith and how it shaped the lives of these senior leaders. My more recent research is expanding on that, but it's not solely looking at religious questions. So if I take all 500 people put together and try and figure out, faith is one dimension of people's lives, but it's not the sole driving factor. Family actually becomes much more important than I expected. And a sense of close relationships with people's kids, with their spouses, is extremely important because leadership is an incredibly lonesome vocation. And there are very, very few of the senior leaders I interview have a large group of very close friends. It's a pretty small, intimate group. People that have known them for many years, that oftentimes knew them long before they rose to leadership, and that becomes sort of their community of sorts. So I'm struck by how faith makes a difference in the lives of some of these folks, but more often than not, they're really longing for community in one form or another. A majority of them did grow up in churched households, but a third of the people that I interviewed who came to faith and talked publicly about their faith actually had a faith awakening after age 17. Which is dramatically higher than you see among the general population. I think in looking at a couple of national studies, it's about 9 times the level of faith conversions occurring among the general population. So that really struck me, how unique their religious lives are. So in the church, we assume that these folks are modified versions of the rest of us, when in fact they're qualitatively different. Their faith journey looks really different. Because they did not grow, because a third of them did not grow up in church families, they don't understand denominations, they don't understand hierarchy, they don't understand the ways we do Christian living in the church. And because of that, many times they're not very engaged, or they're slightly disengaged from local church life. They're very passionate about Jesus, and they're passionate about prayer or Bible study, but they may have very little connection with local church involvement. So that changes sort of the dynamic ways in which we can sort of minister to those folks and understanding what their faith journey looks like. I don't find significant theological differences between that group and the 2/3 people who did grow up going to church, but what I find is that pragmatically they look really different. The third of the people who didn't grow up going to church, they're very impatient with the local church. They don't find that they're really nurtured there. They're much more drawn to church by the personality of the preacher than they are by the sense of obligation to the community. It's much more a personality-driven spiritual quest, and less committed to sort of, this is the teaching of the church, this is the church that nurtured me. I mean, denominational switching is incredibly common among the senior leadership group. One, because they move more than average Americans. 2, because they have multiple homes, and so they oftentimes have multiple church families that they consider to be important to them. And 3rd is because they're much more plugged into the parachurch organizations, particularly in the evangelical tradition, than to a local house of worship. And so they have sort of fungible Christianity when it comes to their ecclesial connections.